Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Just One More Podcast. I believe this is episode 6. I am joined by John. How are you doing, John?
I'm good. I believe you're correct. It is episode 6.
All right. That's, for the most part, once you start getting into more episodes and shows and stuff, I've kind of stopped numbering Game Revision because I think we're in the 30s now with that show, so
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to number them. That way you can keep track of the episodes in your file system. Of course, it's also easy to just go by the date. Say, hey, this is the August 20th, 2022 episode.
Yep, which, as you pointed out, this is August 20th. I think for the most part, we've been talking about the games we kind of map out for what we're going to play over the next week of gaming. And I think for 2 weeks in a row, we've had some surprises kind of creep in, which, for the most part, I probably would not have checked this one game out had you not recommended it. But I'm just kind of curious as to kind of your, like, what with the game What Remains of Edith Finch. You had recommended it, saying that it was going to be leaving Game Pass pretty soon. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, you and I usually have very similar taste in games. We deviate in a few areas, but I think for the most part, we have very similar tastes in games. So when you recommended it, I was like, okay, well, I mean, if it does leave Game Pass pretty soon, might as well check it out just to see what it is. But I'm curious as to, like, how did it get onto your radar?
Well, exactly as you suggested.
Okay.
I just reading True Achievements. Whenever Microsoft released the list of, hey, here are the games that are coming to Xbox, this month or the second half of the month, and also here are the ones that are leaving at the end of the month. Reading True Achievements, they kind of highlighted this one as one that was a short game and an easy completion. And it had been on my radar for a while. Giant Sparrow, developers of this game, also made The Unfinished Swan, which is another game on my backlog that I'll get to at some point. It's just, hey, it's leaving Game Pass. I may as well check it out now and rack up some easy achievements in the process. And it was an enjoyable game, a surreal game.
Yeah, I did not really know what to expect when I first started it. I was like, okay, because you had given it the, well, you had categorized it as the walking simulator.
It's a walking simulator, and you had never heard that term.
Yeah. I've heard of other, like, narrative based things and visual novels and stuff like that, but I was like, a walking simulator, and it's very, very true to that.
Yeah, I mean, you understand what I say now. It's like, it's like Gone Home or Firewatch. It's literally a game where there's not really a lot of gameplay interaction other than just controlling this character, generally walking around the first-person perspective and, interacting with stuff.
Yeah, that's when I started it, I felt like there was so much suspense just going around the house that I really felt like something was going to just, like, pop out at any moment. I thought that somebody was gonna just leap out of one of the cupboards or
and early on it did have some of that really suspense adding moments, like whenever you're walking up on the house and you hear something in the garage.
yeah, that's because I walked over to the garage and I was like, well, maybe I need to explore another area before I actually go into the house. So I started walking away from the garage, and she makes that comment that that she heard something in the garage, and I was like, oh, okay, well, it's gonna be one of those games.
And it was not one of those games.
Yeah, like there was no, like, horror to it. It was just a very suspenseful, just narrative game that starts when you get into the house. And for I don't know when this game actually came out, but I guess spoilers
I
for...
think 2017. So I mean, it's a couple of years old.
Okay, well, just in case, for anybody that hasn't actually checked it out, spoilers, we're probably going to be talking about quite a bit of this game, because I'm very intrigued by it, because I still don't fully understand what all happened, even after
Like
beating it.
what questions do you have?
Like, so the biggest question is, like, with the situation with Molly, like the first
First little story vignette you experience.
Yeah, that first transformation, she becomes a cat, and then she becomes an owl, and then she becomes a shark, and then she becomes a monster with a tentacle that goes around eating people.
Oh, so you mean an octopus?
Well, and I wasn't quite sure if she was an octopus, because
Yeah,
you
she's
just
an
see
octopus.
you just see one tentacle.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously you can make kind of the assumption that, yeah, that she's an octopus, but it's like, how, like, it's just all of these really strange stories about how these characters died, and based on that first story, it kind of seems like maybe Molly ate herself.
No.
Because, like, she goes through the sewer pipe as the monster. She goes through the toilet in her own room. She then goes underneath the bed, and then when she, like, wakes up, she's afraid of the monster under her bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like...
No. So, I mean, have you ever seen the movie Big Fish?
I have not.
This reminded me a lot of Big Fish. Big Fish was a story, or a movie where the kind of like the protagonist of the movie, his dad is dying, and his dad always told these like fantastic surrealist stories, kind of like all these little story vignettes we experienced. And his dad was like a big believer in all this stuff. Like, this really happened, like these marvelous tales. And the main guy, he's more down to earth. He didn't believe it. No, I'm more of a straightforward, like that didn't happen. That's not the way these stories happen. So it kind of reminded me a lot whenever I was playing this game, whenever we like transformed as Molly into all these marvelous creatures. I think that you kind of have to be of one of two minds. It's like, okay, you can either take this literally, like this stuff literally happened, or they're just really marvelous storytellers kind of enhancing what happened to them. Because in Molly's case, I think there's I don't know if it's something that Edith recites or she reads or something happens, but there is a line of dialogue or a line of text that says that, Molly died of poisoning from the toothpaste she ate and those berries she ate. So, I mean, really, she died of that food poisoning, but in her mind, this is the way that she died. This marvelous story.
Okay, because I did not see that that line, but it would make sense, like the dry gerbil food that she ate, and the toothpaste, and I also kind of wondered if those little berries were like plastic or real, like not really sure. But yeah, like that just kind of, the game had already been running for a little bit before you get to the Molly story, but then going into that story and all those transformations, and it goes from just walking around a house to actually, like, there's a little bit of gameplay there, like swooping down, getting the rabbits,
kind of the platforming as the cat to get the bird.
Yeah, which at first I was actually kind of lost on with that one, because I just kept running back and forth. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And every time, like, I would hold the R2 down, or the right trigger. So I would hold it down, but I guess I wasn't in close enough to a platform that I could jump to. So I would just kind of like crouch down, and then nothing would happen. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, there obviously I can't go back into the house, but then I ended up figuring out that I just wasn't close enough to where the bird was once at, to jump up there and then jump over and start chasing the bird around. So for the most part, like that first, you had kind of talked about how it set a pretty good pace for you, or a pretty good
kind of set expectations of what to expect for the rest of the game. Like I said, like almost immediately it reminded me of Big Fish, and the way she's telling this story and talking about her family members, and how her mom didn't really want her to find a lot of this stuff initially, and like her grandma was always like leaned into it, like. And whenever you walk up on the house, it's like, okay, well, this is not going to be a normal story. This is not going to be really a totally 100% this actually happened sort of thing. There's going to be some surrealism to it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of a lot of family members that lived in this house. There's Gregory, the little baby that...
little baby with like psychic powers, psychic abilities.
Playing with his toys and stuff in the bath, and it appears that he dies from drowning. And then there's Gus, who I think Gus is the one with the kite, I believe.
Oh, yeah, kite, and he was upset about his dad remarrying.
Yeah, and so like that was a really cool, just as you're flying the kite around, letters are appearing, and then when the storm starts creeping in, like going around and picking up all the stuff around the wedding, and so that was kind of cool. But I think my favorite family member to play their story was Lewis, the family member that worked at the cannery.
Okay, yeah, her older brother.
Yeah. It's a very... I mean, the ending is not great. I mean, all these characters, the end of their story is how they died. So, like, they're not happy endings. But I really enjoyed playing the Lewis's story, just because you're kind of doing two things at once through most of his story.
Yeah, you're controlling his little character in his dream world while also, dealing with the monotony of his job of sliding fish under the cutter and sliding the corpses up.
Yeah, and just kind of like as his story progresses, his imagination is taking over more and more and more, and like part of me thought that he was going, like, at some point his hand was going to get cut off or something.
Yeah, I had the same thought, like, okay, when's it going to happen?
Yeah, because like as his like imagination is taking over more of the screen, I'm like, okay, at some point he's gonna, like, the game's going to allow you to move his hand just far enough to where it's under the little cutter thing, but that doesn't happen. He becomes quote unquote crowned by the council, I believe, and of course he has to kneel to be crowned, and then pop, he dies. Most likely by putting his head under his own head under the cutter and decapitating himself. But
yeah, I mean, some of the background on it, the family, the Finch family, there's believed to be some sort of odd curse where they all die in unexpected or odd ways, and so this is her kind of coming back as the last member of the Finch family, and of course she knows some of these already, but this is her really reacquainting herself with her past family members and seeing what befell them.
Do you know if this game got a direct sequel, or do you know anything as far as like...
No, I think this is the most recent thing Giant Sparrow has made. I believe Unfinished Swan was their first game, made in collaboration with Sony Santa Monica, so that's one exclusive to the PlayStation family. And again, I haven't played it, but I think it's very similar to this, like a walking simulator. And then this game from 2017, to my knowledge, is the last game they've made, so they're due for another.
I would kind of, because at the end, you very, very briefly, you get to see Edith's son. So it'd be kind of cool to see kind of the story pick up where maybe he's putting like the final pieces together about what happened with the family, or trying to figure out more about this family curse, or maybe even something about like maybe more like a prequel where you get to play as like Odin as they're upheaving their lives to to come over and get to see the original house. That was one thing that was just a little bit of when you're going through Edie's story, getting to almost like you're right outside the original house before I think Dawn, who is Edith's mother, like snatches her out of the story and tries to take that book away from her. So it would be kind of cool to see a continuation of the story just from the eyes of, or the perspective of Edith's son, who, I mean, there's got to be more to these stories than what this one game showed off.
Well, that's not what you're getting. Their next game is still early in development, but the focus is on interactions between humans and urban wildlife.
Huh, okay, well, dashed those dreams pretty quickly. But yeah, for anybody who hasn't checked this game out, it is it's like what, 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours easy. I mean, I think I beat it and unlocked all the achievements in 2 hours and 42 minutes. I got the bulk of them on that initial playthrough, and then after you beat the game, you can kind of go back and like select a chapter to clean up anything you missed. And yeah, it probably took me like 2.5 hours to beat the game and another 15 to clean up on the few missing achievements. So yeah, I mean, this is like a 3-hour game tops.
So for anybody out there with Game Pass, definitely need to check it out, because it leaves in what, a couple weeks, like a week or two,
week and a half, T-minus 11 days or something like that. And speaking of games leaving Game Pass and other short games and other games published by Annapurna Interactive, I also
kind of on a roll right now.
Yeah, I mean they've put out a ton of high class indie games. Of course, they're Annapurna Interactive. They're a subsidiary of a film studio who does the same sort of thing. But another game I checked out by them, also leaving Game Pass this month, was 12 Minutes. Now, do you know anything about 12 Minutes?
That I do not. Is it another walking simulator that has a lot of easy achievements that I could get before it leaves Game Pass?
No, it is not a walking simulator, but it does have short playthrough, like 2 to 4 hours, and an easy completion if you're going for all the achievements. I am not going to, though. It is a time loop game, so you're experiencing this little story vignette, and you fail, and then you do something different to try and get a different ending, to try and just basically figure out what's going on. You play from a top-down perspective. You play as this guy coming home. You enter his apartment. His wife is there. She's going to share a surprise with you. And, you really just have a top-down view of, like, the apartment interior, a bedroom, a closet, and a bathroom. So there's not really a lot of place that you can go and explore. There are a number of items you can pick up and interact with and kind of use with other items, like in a point-and-click game. But she's got a surprise to tell you, and then before long, a supposed self-possessed or self-proclaimed cop arrives at the door and basically ties you both up and is searching for something, and then hits you or kills you, and then you just black out, and then you return back to the beginning, and you're like, what's going on? What? And so you're basically trying to uncover that mystery, trying to figure out what happened.
I think I remember at like one of the like game conventions last year, I think I remember seeing a trailer for it, now that you kind of explained it. Like
yeah, it's pretty neat. It's made, as far as I can tell, a lot, predominantly by one guy, like Louis Antonio. And it's got, it's actually got kind of tying into Annapurna's Hollywood credentials. It's got James McAvoy, Daisy Ridley, and
What?
William Dafoe providing the
Holy crap.
voices. Yeah, so, I
Man,
mean, it's
that-
got a star-studded cast, but I honestly it wasn't clicking with me. I think I played it for like an hour and a half, and I was making some progress. Like, I'd get a little further in the storyline, and I was asking my wife these questions and like kind of interviewing her or like confronting her about like, hey, do you know what's going on? Like, of course she doesn't know anything of what's happening, so you're trying to like, well, let me prove it to you. Let me prove what's happening, or tell me about this thing that the cop says he's searching for. But after an hour and a half, it just wasn't clicking with me. I guess I just wasn't feeling
Well,
enough satisfaction or reward for what I had done so far, and eventually just decided, okay, well, I guess I'm done.
yeah. I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but one of the you and I had played.
Her story.
Yeah, Her Story.
So you
Wow.
don't even got to remember it. I know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean that encyclopedic mind of yours.
Which,
that
speaking of that, I think Sam, that game was designed by Sam Barlow. I think he has another game on Game Pass right now. I think he did Telling Lies.
yeah, that's I kept thinking of Telling Lies, but I was like, it's not that game. It's the game before that. But I remember you and I playing Her Story, and that is such a good like murder mystery type of game from an independent creator.
Yeah, basically getting like all these pieces of the story, but getting them out of order. So having to like, okay, well, she said this here. Was this after this other piece of information she told us, or
Yeah.
was it before?
Yeah. And then just having to like really pay attention to some of the like finer details of just like her mannerisms, the behavior, what she's wearing, what's on the table, and then trying to piece all that stuff together was awesome.
Yeah, and looking at the whenever I basically said, okay, I think I'm done, I went ahead and just read the achievement descriptions for this game, kind of like what Remains of Edith Finch. There's only like 10 or 12, so there's not a ton. And the story goes places. Like, there are a ton of different routes the story can pan out to. So
Multiple endings.
Seems, multiple endings. It seems really cool. And, like what Remains of Edith Finch, it's going to be on Game Pass for another week and a half. So I may just decide, in a couple days, be like, yeah, you know what, screw it. I am going to go re-download that, and I'm just going to go ahead and bust through the story with, just following these achievement guides, because at this point I basically got like right up to the point where the story was going to start get interesting and expand itself, and it was also about the same time where it's like, I don't feel like I'm making a ton of progress. It's like, well, I guess if I would have just done it one more like little 12-minute loop, I probably would have got there and been like, okay, I'm hooked now. But interesting game.
Well, and that's kind of with Edith Finch. Like, once I got everything done and finished the achievements, which I didn't look at the achievement list until after I had gotten a pretty good. I probably got about halfway through before I looked at the achievement list, because I was like, what exactly am I looking for these? I think I was going into Barbara's story when I looked at the achievement list, and like a couple of them I was like, oh crap, I didn't wait for the drunken sailor to finish his song before before eating him. And I was like,
Did you take both roads to the house?
Yeah, I did that. So that was kind
Okay.
of I went through the forest or the wooded area first, because I was like, well, if there's going to be some story, I'm sure this will be the path. But then I ended up I went through the wooded areas up to the house, and then I went from the house up until I got the achievement. Which, when the achievement popped, I was like, okay, so I am going to have to kind of pay attention to some of the finer details and stuff, and just kind of really explore everywhere.
Yeah, I took the walking trail, the wooded path as well, and I even like looked back up at the road, the like driving road, and I was like, I ought to go up there because there's probably something odd with this game. I was like, nah, whatever. And then after I beat the game and went back and looked at the achievements, I was like, "Are you kidding me? I literally thought
Yeah.
I ought to go up there," and then second guessed myself. It's like, oh well.
Um, I did get a little bit when I was walking through the woods, and I don't know if you got the same vibe, but while walking through the woods, a little bit of like a Resident Evil 7 vibe. Because like at the beginning of Resident Evil 7, you're walking through that wooded area, and I was like, I wasn't quite thinking that something was gonna be like that as far as like Resident Evil 7, but just kind of walking through the woods and stuff. It gets fairly quiet at one point, and so I start thinking, okay, I'm gonna see somebody, or I'm gonna see something in this wooded area. But then nothing ever happened. It was just her talking about how she almost feels more scared about the silence in the woods than the house itself. But yeah, that's so yeah. And I'm glad that I did look at the achievements before, like as I was going into Barbara's story, because there's one achievement for like knocking all the balls off of the pool table.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, this would have likely been one that I missed had I not seen the achievement list. But yeah, it took me 3 swoops the first time through to get the rabbits, because I really didn't know what I was looking for on the first swoop. But then the words popped up. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Here's one of the rabbits. Oh, here's the mama rabbit. So it was that one and the drunken sailor that I missed out on the first playthrough. And then I saw the achievement for playing Calvin's story again, and I was like, how do I do that? And then after I beat the game and it explained that I could then play through the stories in any order, I was like, oh, okay. They just want you to play that story section again.
Yeah. Which I don't know if you felt this way at all, or if it's just me, and like especially me, like after having a kid. But there were so many times where it was easy to like have tears well up in my eyes, like get emotional, like, oh, like Calvin's story was one of them. The twin brother reciting basically what happened. He always wanted to fly. And it was dinner time. We were going out, and I told him, you can't go over the top of this tree on the swing. And then, if I didn't tell him that, he probably wouldn't have done it. And, that was the day he flew. Yeah. It's like, oh shit, yeah. That is sad and heartwarming all at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I did actually, in Gregory's story, I did, with you recommending the game, it made me think, like in Gregory's story with him being in the bathtub, like as that whole thing was going on, I was like, oh no, don't have it go this way. So yeah, I was like, this is like the way that the storytelling in the game is, like, it's very well done. Like that.
I mean, yeah, you really get attached to these characters in like such a short amount of time. These are all like maybe like 10-minute tops, little story vignettes, and you just really get attached to them. And of course, you're playing from the perspective of a family member, so that kind of helps too. She's talking about her uncles or her brothers or her grandpa, grandma.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, like none of these characters really have a happy death. So there's like in this short amount of time, like I got connected pretty quickly with a lot of these characters, just with how they presented these character stories. Whether it was like Gus after I think the death of his wife, or
no, Gus.
Gus
was the
Sam. The one that like turned the basement into like a safe house or something. I think that was Sam.
That was the I don't know the name, but that was after the death of Barbara. Barbara was his sister, and he's the one who went underground.
Walter. Yeah, I think it was Walter. That because when you're going through the house, you get into his room and it's just completely empty. Well, it's because he had completely uprooted his life from inside the house to into that like makeshift
Yeah,
safe house, safe room.
mom said never go into the basement, and every now and then I'd see Grandma Edie going into the basement and taking stuff down there. It's like, oh, well, now I know what she was doing. Like, I had an uncle living
Yeah.
down here the whole time.
And the thing with Walter's story was so simple. It was very simplistic. Like you open up like 3 cans of peaches, and then
As decades go by, yeah, just to
and then
illustrate,
you
hey, he's been down here, decades, and he's basically lived the same day over and over and over again.
yeah, and he's talking about the earthquakes, and of course you end up finding out that it's not quite an earthquake. Um, he ends up finally deciding to leave his life behind, and he uses the sledgehammer to break through the wall, and then he's on some train tracks, and then
Splat.
yeah,
Yeah, basically, hey, I can't live my life in fear anymore. I can't just live the same day over and over. I need to face my fears and be the
yeah,
Finch that I need to be. And he
and
was.
yeah, and then once he finally let go of trying to just protect what life he had left, then reality saw to his end too. Um, but like, I guess that's another thing that I really like. It's weird. Like I don't think I enjoyed the game because it's not really a happy game, but like I was very intrigued and interested, and like all of the stories they were all unique. There wasn't anything like they didn't have anything that was like
Oh, I've already
just
seen
a
this.
palette swap. Yeah, like everybody. Also, I'm kind of curious. Like another question mark that they could tie into on if they ever do a sequel or if anybody picks up the story. But like with Milton, they never found his body. He just disappeared one day, and he was like the middle sibling between Edith and I think Lewis. So like when he went missing, Edith. I think was 11, or 9 or 11 when Milton left or like disappeared. I mean, I think we can just assume that he died. But
Yeah, because he's the one where he like goes into his painting, but of course, as you're crawling throughout the house, you see his artwork like crawling in the ductwork and stuff.
yeah, and he has that little like he made that flip book up in his room or I think his room. It may
Yeah,
have
the
been just like
flip book showing him going into his painting.
yeah. So there is stuff that they could go back to flesh out things even more. But
Yeah, we could just leave the mystery too. I mean, everything doesn't have to be explained. We don't have all the answers in life. We probably never will.
well, I mean that is very true. But did you have a favorite like family story?
Mm, no, I mean they're all pretty good. It's just a great little collage of all these vignettes, this family history.
Um, but outside of what remains, what remains of Edith Finch, you said you're playing like 12 minutes, and you're probably going to go back and try to clean up all the achievements.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm probably going back, but I'll probably, that idea will probably sit in my mind until it leaves Game Pass. It was just a little bothersome. I didn't find it super enjoyable and rewarding enough to continue on.
Oh.
And then besides, those games we've talked about, I've still been trucking away at Shining Force.
Yeah.
about halfway done with it now. I think I'm like 12 hours in. I just started chapter 5, and it looks like there's 8 chapters in the game. So, made some decent progress. It's interesting going back and playing this in this long, because in the past I've ever really only checked it out, so I didn't have a full picture of the game. Of course, knew it was a strategy RPG or tactical RPG, but it is interesting now that I'm like this far into it to see, okay, tactical RPGs have come a long way. This one is, pretty simple, and it did come out in 1993, at least over here in the States, at least, so that's understandable, but it's enjoyable. I've had some difficulty. I've had some characters die on missions. Generally, it's like the healers or the mages who have, the lower HP totals than like the knights, the centaur knights, or those people who are supposed to be on the front lines. It's not super punishing because we can bring those people back, and it's not too much of a cost. Basically, those little the friars, the priests, they bring them back for like 1% of the gold that I have. So it's enjoyable.
Do you think you'll dive right into Shining Force 2 after you're done with Shining Force, or take a little bit of a break?
No, I'll probably take a break. This game, started playing it just kind of spur of the moment sort of thing. I am interested to play Shining Force 2 and further my experience with the Shining series. And kind of on that note, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast last week or not, but the Sega Genesis Mini 2 that's coming out, they have released the full slate of titles that will appear on the system. And
it's like
there
60
are...
games?
I'm sorry, what?
I think it's like 60 games.
Yeah, 60 plus, like 60 games, and then a handful of kind of quote-unquote extra titles, like bonus titles that M2 has put together. There's a number of RPGs on here that look like it may make it worth its while. I mean, Shining Force CD is on there. I think, like I said, that's one you and I talked about either on the podcast or off.
Yeah, and how expensive it can be.
And additionally, the one that really caught my eye was Crusader of Senti on the Genesis. Do you know about that game?
I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
Okay, well, that makes sense because it's super rare and super expensive. Like, it sells for, like, I don't know, 3 digits, maybe 4 digits complete.
God, what?
And it's a really well-regarded Zelda-style action RPG, kind of like Legend of Zelda and maybe a little bit of Crystallis mixed in there. And it's produced by, it was produced by Sega, and I think, in fact, it was intended to be a game in the Shining series, and then just wasn't, but it had a super small print run over here in the States, so copies sell for, like I said, at least 3 digits, maybe 4 digits, and this is the first time it's going to be officially re-released, because again, this is a Sega game. There's nothing stopping them from doing it in the past, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's going to be on this, I kind of had no interest in getting this product, in the Sega Genesis Mini 2, it's $100. It's only releasing on Amazon's Japanese website. So there is a North American and English localized version, but you have to order it from Amazon Japan. So in addition to the $100 cost, it'll have like a $30 shipping cost. But not going to lie, the fact that like Crusader of Senti's on there, Shining Force CD, and there are a number of other RPGs and otherwise interesting, like quote unquote rare picks on it, I am pretty tempted to get it.
And you said it's called Crusader of Senti?
Yes. Yeah, you ought to look it up.
Well,
and just check it out. I mean, and one of the things in the back of my mind is like, well, I could pay $100 to get this device, or I could just go run an emulator. Now, one thing that would make me want to get the Sega Genesis Mini 2 is just the fact that it's an M2 product. M2 is basically
it's not an
puts out like the top of the top old games, like their emulation, their recreation work is just top notch, like the bar. So it's like, well, if I play the games on this, I'm probably going to get a more authentic experience, a more true to form experience than if I'm just playing it on an emulator, even though that emulator would be basically free.
Yeah. Well, and I guess kind of a little bit of the, like, another side of the coin is just like supporting Sega's efforts on bringing some of these much more rare, harder to find, and the secondhand market has completely ballooned at the price.
Yeah.
Of like being like, okay, Sega, this is what you should be doing. Like really, utilizing your previous portfolio to like
Expand beyond the normal Genesis games you always re-release.
yeah. And it's something that I say all the time about Sony and Jim Ryan. Like, you have such a massive portfolio of titles that are from before 2005. You should do stuff with them. Like, whether remasters, remakes, doing a collection, like something. Like, just support these already existing titles. And like I said, I never heard anything about this Crusader of Sinti game, but it's definitely on my radar now.
Yeah, need to keep it in mind. One other cool thing about this that again is kind of making me think, maybe I will get this. Phantasy Star 2 is on it, and Phantasy Star 2 is a game that's basically been in every one of Sega's Genesis compilations. But
Yeah.
Phantasy Star 2 is pretty brutal by today's standards. I played it, or I tried to play it last year, and I think I've sunk like 10 or a dozen hours into it, and I eventually just gave up because I felt the game was too difficult to not use a guide. Like, we both kind of try and play a game without a guide, at least on that first playthrough. And
Yeah.
Phantasy Star 2, like, it's totally a game where it's like, yeah, I could do that if I wanted to just blow my brains out. So I stopped playing it. The version on this one, M2 is actually putting in some stuff to make it a little easier. They're like lowering the encounter rate, doubling the money and experience gain from battles, and doing some other stuff that makes it a little more friendlier for today's audience, which is basically what they did with the Phantasy Star, the Sega Ages Phantasy Star release on the Switch. The one thing it'll lack compared to that game that really sticks out in my mind is the auto mapping feature, where basically like 1/3 of the screen is devoted to the map. So as you go through the dungeon, you basically fill out the map and can kind of see where you've been or where you're going, where you need to go.
Yeah.
But so those sort of changes make me especially interested. It's like, well, crap, that's probably a version that I wouldn't immediately be able to play via emulation. So maybe I do need to just go ahead and plop down the $130 or whatever to get this.
So, to kind of bring back a slight topic from a previous episode, you had said that Phantasy Star 2, by today's standards, without the use of a guide, you want to blow your brains out. But how does it stack up against like Pack and Roll?
Well, Pack and Roll you don't need a guide for Pack and Roll. Pack and Roll's very straightforward. It's a linear game.
I just remember how your reaction to
how upset I was. Like Pack and Roll, I did beat that. I think by the time we recorded last week's podcast, I had finished that game and was done with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a game I was able to get through. That's also a game that's like 3 hours long. Phantasy Star 2 is going to be a game that's like 30 hours long. And, basically there are dungeons in Phantasy Star 2 that are probably going to be like an hour or two long, because you're just going to be swamped with a ridiculous encounter rate. You're going to be kind of flying blind. You don't know where you're going, where you need to go. So you're having to like explore every route, every pathway. And then I can still remember it. Like what killed me, like what eventually made me be like, okay, I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. Was the dungeon. There was a dungeon that I got to where you basically had all these gaps in the floor that you had to fall to progress. And there's lots of these holes, so it's not like, oh, just go find the one hole where you got to fall and then keep moving on. No, you have to like keep figuring it out. There's many holes you have to fall through. So at that point I was like, it always pains me to stop playing a game whenever I start. It's even like 12 minutes. I say I maybe will return to that. It's like I always like to remain optimistic, but at some point I just have to cut the cord, and Phantasy Star 2 was one where it's like, yeah, maybe I'll come back to it someday and I'll just play through it with a guide, but maybe I won't either.
Yeah. Well, So outside of Shining Force, I'm sure you're still playing some version of Pokemon.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
always got to have
the,
a Pokemon mixed in there.
the evergreen Pokemon titles.
Which
Um,
Pokemon? I don't know if it's the World Championships are going on right now or just like the European Championships, but there is a Victini being given away through tomorrow for Sword and Shield. So if you want a perfect Victini with probably, I think it maybe has like some unique moves or unique nature or unique ability or something, there's a code out there to get it.
well, outside of that, is there uh, anything else that you've been playing that, or are you pretty much just like focused in on finishing Shining Force, or do you have like like an actual secondary title that you're playing?
No. Right now, I'm focusing in on Shining Force, with Edith Finch being completed and 12 minutes getting
Yeah.
passed on. I've said, I think, the last couple weeks, or probably since we've started recording this, Deedlit, that Record of Lodoss War Metroidvania, that's one of the games that's on my to-do list. I'll probably start playing that soon now that I'm done with Edith Finch and 12 minutes, and probably play that alongside Shining Force.
Gotcha. Um, well, I did put a little bit more time into Triangle Strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I am
Yeah, you beat that.
I am very, very close now. I've started. I'm almost all the way through chapter 18. I think there's like 19 or 20 chapters in the game, and of course, near the end, they you get to recruit another character when the game is almost over, and the character matches the level of your party, and I won't say names and stuff or anything like that.
I mean,
but
you could say the names. I'm gonna forget them in like 3 minutes.
okay, well,
Bob.
so
You recruited Bob.
close enough. So Bob, for the most part, was introduced earlier in the game. There's things that ensue. He disappears for a while, and then pretty much a chapter, maybe chapter and a half before the game finishes, he gets reintroduced as a recruitable character. Of course, even though his level matches the party, or like my main party, like I think everyone right now is 26 to 30, I think is the level of my, like, the characters that I actually use. So even though he's like level 26 or 27, he doesn't have any like weapon upgrades. So one thing that I've been doing is kind of going through the mock battle system, and generating money and getting the resources to try to increase his weaponry. But I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, I don't really want to keep doing this. I would rather just get to the end of the game. So the missions that I'm on now, they are taking a little bit longer because they're utilizing bigger battlefields, and like one of the missions that I just wrapped up, enemies were dropping bombs inside of this mine, so I would have to get to these bombs within 70 individual like character turns to defuse the bomb, while also trying to eliminate all the enemies from the mine itself. So having to juggle both of those while not having my party die took a little bit longer. I think it was about an hour-long mission, maybe an hour and a half. But I am almost done. I am almost finished with Triangle Strategy. It is a really, really good game that hopefully more people check out.
Yeah, count me among them. That's one where I need to carve time out and play at some point.
It is definitely... I think they could have done some better execution with the scales of balance system that they have in the game to supposedly allow you to shape and mold the story as you see fit. But there's definitely a lot left to be desired with that system because it just isn't quite executed very well. Plus, for the first 10 hours of the game, there's really no explanation as much as like you don't need to talk to everybody. If you're just trying to get your point across, you don't need to talk to everybody, because if you do talk to everybody, you could potentially be forced in a situation where they end up voting against you because you make it seem like that's the path you want to take. Which I did not understand that until about 10 or so hours into the game, and I was like, oh. Because it tells you, talk to everybody. Like, investigate everybody, question everybody. Like, so I did that, and for the first 10 hours of the game, almost none of what I actually wanted to do happened because I talked to everybody. And people who were originally going to vote the way that I wanted them to vote would change their vote because they thought that I was going in this other direction with it, and I wasn't. I was just talking to everybody. And it's just it's a system that once you do start up a conversation with the character, you can't back out of that conversation unless you just load up your save again. Which I did a couple times, but then I realized, oh, if you are already voting for the way that I want us to go, I'm not talking to you, because I could potentially end up talking you out of that path and you vote against what I want. So it's a very interesting system that, like I said, I feel like they could have done a little bit better on the execution part of it, but it is a very good game. It isn't too like tactical based. Like, it is a tactical RPG, but like with like Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre, there's, characters have so many abilities and skills and things that they can do on the battlefield. With Triangle Strategy, it is much more restrictive. I think
like in those games, you've got classes and jobs, right? Is there equivalent in this game, or is it basically, hey, John is a swordsman, he is only ever going to be a swordsman?
So it kind of pulls a little bit from Fire Emblem, where they already have there's not, like, you can't decide their class or their job. They essentially start off as, like, let's say that you start off as like an archer. You can then upgrade the character to like
like one of two
ranger
types of archers.
Well, and there's not even two types. It's literally just a direct line. Like, start off as an archer, become a hunter, and then become a ranger. And you just see a very small increase to like their HP, the available TP that they have access to, which is their tactical points. But pretty much all of the characters have access to about 5 or 6 abilities, which they will typically have access to once they reach level 30. So it isn't quite as deep of a tactical game as like a Fire Emblem or a Final Fantasy Tactics or a Tactics Ogre, but it is a fairly good, like, kind of dip your toe into the tactical RPG like gameplay. And then the story is pretty good. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and a lot of characters with very big personalities. So I highly recommend everybody that likes RPGs, likes tactical RPGs, to check it out, because it is a good game. And I've been kind of going back and forth on whether I want to do like a full-on review for it. I've got a lot of notes that I took earlier in my playtime with the game, so I may end up doing a review for it. I'm just not 100% sure yet.
Okay, well, you spend time with anything else this last week?
Well, let's see. While getting over or dealing with all of this like congestion and stuff, I really haven't played a whole lot of stuff outside of. I found it very easy to play What Remains of Edith Finch because I didn't really have to do a whole lot of like focusing or gameplay stuff. So like,
yeah, you can just be sick, sit back, and soak it up.
Yeah. So for the most part, like I didn't really get to like I tried to play a little bit of Smite, but like my brain just could not like react or fire like quick enough to be able to do any type of like competitive thing. And then on top of that, just like I'm really hoping that all of this is gone by the time that I finish Triangle Strategy so that I can play Eowyn Chronicle and do a stream of that so I can finally get that taken care of as well. But usually whenever I'm like about to start playing or get into Eowyn Chronicle, I end up dealing with some kind of like respiratory problem.
Maybe that's a sign to just either stop playing, just say, okay, I'm done with Eowyn Chronicle, or just knuckle down and do it and just get it over with.
Yeah, because like it's definitely a situation where at this point I don't even really remember like the voices that I gave to certain characters, so it's not even like I could try to replicate that anyways. So but like with Triangle Strategy nearly done, Eowyn Chronicle is on the horizon now. I did pick up a couple games during the big like Best Buy sale with Neo and King's Bounty 2.
You got Neo, the Team Ninja action game. That's cool.
No,
not Neo. Oh,
yeah,
you mean Neo, The World Ends With You.
Yeah,
or
that
whatever
one,
it is.
That one.
Yeah, whenever you said Neo, it took me a second to be like, wait a minute. He's not talking about that game. He's talking about the other Neo.
Yeah, that's I just really after Elden Ring, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going all in on these other FromSoft style games.
Give me the Final Fantasy. Give me Neo, but only the ones developed by Team Ninja.
Yeah. So, I think I was very intrigued to read about King's Bounty 2. Just it's such a big RPG world. I remember playing The World Ends With You on the the DS or the 3DS? On the DS. It was a very interesting take on like an RPG, and so many years later they came out with a pseudo sequel thing to it.
Yeah, they also remastered it a couple years before as well.
Yeah, and again, just really, like I've said it. I think on the podcast and on GamerVision that I'm really liking this era of Square Enix where they are actually embracing more than just Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest.
Wait a minute. Embracing? Are they going to be embraced?
Well, I mean, they've already sold off some of their studios, so who knows?
Yeah. By all accounts, they're trying to get a little skinny to be acquired.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the topics that is on the GamerVision episode that I'm currently editing. Because there's like 3 potential buyers, and well, with how Embracer Group is handling things, I mean, there could be a 4th. But I think that would be a fairly sizable purchase. But, at this point, there is no company that is too big to acquire. So I think Activision Blizzard has completely shown, hey, nobody is too big to be purchased.
Yeah, nobody's off the table.
But one of my biggest questions about the Embracer Group acquisitions here recently is how did they manage to get Middle-earth Enterprises for like half of what they were asking? Like, that just still blows my mind. Like, they were asking for $2 billion and they sold for $1 billion. So,
I mean, it may be like whenever you go and buy a car, they just haggled. Or whenever you sell a car, it's like, hey, I want to sell this car. Like, realistically, I want to sell this car for $10,000. I'm going to ask for $15,000 and let somebody haggle me down to $12,500. And hey, I made $2,500 more than I wanted to. Maybe Middle-earth Enterprises really felt that they had $1 billion valuation, but they wanted to start high and maybe negotiate down. And who knows, maybe they thought they had a $750 million valuation.
Yeah, I mean, it just I'm just very, very surprised. It was just kind of a very out of nowhere like announcement that Embracer Group, and then to top it all off, like going into the thread storm from Wario64 about just this company got acquired and this company got acquired and this company got acquired, and it just kind of a widespread, like Limited Run Games. Like, Limited Run Games is now owned by Embracer Group, which is another thing that I'm just kind of like, I don't really understand that one.
Yeah, I mean, Limited Run has expanded so much since they were founded, and
they have their own store now.
Josh,
a physical store.
Yeah, Josh and Doug, the two co-owners, co-founders. I don't know. I mean, it seemed like they're just raking in the money. They're doing a great job for themselves, and they're not just raking in money, but they're actually putting out like even better and better, like more complicated stuff. Like now, basically everything they're putting out has a collector's edition with all sorts of doodads. They've got Jeremy Parrish like putting together books and like subsidizing his stuff. Milky works for them now. I don't know if you knew that. James Milky. So yeah, they're basically recreating 1UP.
Well, hey, if that happens, I am all for that. I would love to see a full-on reunion by a bunch of those guys.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is just them getting ready to cash out. I don't really see that being the thing because, Josh and Doug, they're always both on Twitter talking about like the games they're acquiring, or if it's just that they got such a good offer they couldn't resist, or that it's just, hey, we have even bigger ideas for where this can go. We just need the financing to get us there.
And I'm kind of wondering like how, because like they've got I would assume that they got a pretty good like working relationship with Best Buy, since they do exclusive like Best Buy releases of limited run stuff. Kind of wondering like if that will continue in the future, or if that's going to expand. Like, now that Embracer Group will be, I would assume, more involved in the, like, business
I'm very interested to see if this impacts the lineup of games that Limited Run releases. If there are companies who just say, well, technically Embracer is our competitor, so, like Konami, like, no, we're not going to let you re-release our Castlevania games or Contra games in the future. Or if it's still kind of a non-issue, like, no, they're not a competitor. They're like somebody who is adding on. They're a value-added service provider. But I guess, too, with Embracer making this purchase and then also purchasing, like, Tatsujin and I think, like, the rights to a bunch of Toaplan games, like a bunch of real influential arcade games from the late 80s, early 90s, I think they say, like, they're really into preservation, game preservation, and re-releases of historical games. So I guess when viewed from that lens, these acquisitions kind of make sense, and I guess it's up to each individual person to either take them at their word on that or believe them or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as like game preservation goes, I mean they did salvage a good portion of THQ. So
yeah, but
like
I mean, what does that mean for game preservation? They didn't salvage them. They just purchased the name and purchased the rights to a number of things. Like, game preservation can't be left up to these companies because they've been shown that they're not willing or able to do it. Like, there are some people, like Limited Run Games, I think they worked in concert with Digital Eclipse or whatever became of Digital Eclipse, the company they are now, on an engine that makes it easier for them to port old games, like kind of a universal game engine that would be applicable for like all platforms. So I mean, they put some work towards it, and Josh Fairhurst of Limited Run, he has actually gone out and put his money where his mouth is and actually purchased some admittedly terrible IPs, but he has done the legwork to bring back some terrible old games like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties or Plumbers Don't Wear Pants, whatever it's called.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're gonna go the route of preservation, I guess you have to preserve everything. But so I think so. Over the next week, you think you'll finish with Shining Force? Do you see any obstacles or anything that could keep that from happening? Or
yeah, life. No.
Outside of life.
Outside of life, no. I don't know if I'll have the time to beat it. I think I'm like like I said, I'm a little more than halfway through, so I probably got another like 10 or 15 hours left with the game. I don't know that I'll. Actually, I guess it's foreseeable I could devote that much time to it over the next week, so maybe I will beat it. But I'd also like I said, I'd also like to start that Record of the Lodoss War Deedlit Metroidvania, so that may siphon some of my time away from this.
Yeah, well, the Deedlit game, that's not a very long title either, is it?
Yeah, that's one that's
kind of
like,
a short one.
Yeah, that's like maybe a dozen hours, 20 hours tops, I'm thinking.
Well, for me, I should, after maybe one more play session with Triangle Strategy, I should have that game beat, now that I'm not going to try to focus on maxing out this late character recruit. And then after that, finally beat Aeoden Chronicle, grind through, muscle my way through the trophies of that game to get that 100%, get that completed, get that done.
And then after those two, do you have anything in the docket?
Well, I was thinking of Yakuza Like a Dragon, but yeah, I'll probably settle on that one, and then depending on how that goes, let's see, it's August 20th. Star Ocean: The Divine Force. That's like a mid-October release, right?
I have no idea.
I know it's an October release. I can't quite remember when it comes out, but
okay, so there's still like a month and a half at least till that game comes out. Maybe 2 months.
So I for the most part, I want to make sure that I'm not like, if I finish Triangle Strategy in about one more session, Aeoden Chronicle should be like maybe a week's worth of just grinding through those remaining trophies. Yakuza Like a Dragon, I could probably have beaten, and maybe have enough time for one more game before Star Ocean Divine Force, because I would like to have just a complete clear slate before going into that game. Have no idea really how long Divine Force is going to be, but I would like to have everything just kind of cleared out so that I'm just focusing on that one, because I think that you're getting it day one as well, I think.
Yes.
So that'll be one where, the podcast will likely have several sessions of us just kind of going back and forth on just how we handle our characters, what we think of the story, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully sometime soon we can do a podcast in person.
Yeah.
This is episode 6 and we're still doing this remotely. Not exactly how we were planning or wanting to do the podcast, but it's worked out okay so far.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's do you have any potential reviews
No,
planned or thought about?
yeah, I mean, sure, I thought about, just haven't sat down,
Yeah.
devoted the time to putting them together. Don't know that I will, but definitely would like to.
Yeah, that's kind of like I said earlier about triangle strategy. I'm like, I already have a bunch of notes for it, but I don't know if I really want to turn all those notes into an actual review of it. But it is a game that I highly recommend people play. Just like with Yakuza Like a Dragon, another fantastic modern take on a turn-based RPG that provides a pretty good template for other companies to look at and say, hey, turn-based still has a place. But I think that's probably a good stopping point, don't you?
I agree.
All right. So, I have been Jeff from Just One More Level.
And this was John from mybrainongames.com.
And we'll see you or you'll hear from us in the next episode, which will be episode 7 of Just One More Podcast, which is available on Anchor, Spotify, later on Google Podcast, and soon Apple Podcast once I have all that straightened out. So, see you next week.
Bye-bye.